Demetrious Johnson, aka Mighty Mouse, is one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, if not the greatest. But despite his recognition as one of the greatest, a lot of people don't really understand his resume. We know he's incredibly skilled, well-rounded, and defended that title 11 times. But who actually were the people he beat before and after the UFC? And how impressive were those opponents for him to beat at the time? So today I'm going to go through every single opponent on Demetrious Johnson's MMA record and rank them based on this criteria. The criteria will sort an opponent into a category. The ranking will be based on where the opponent was rated at the time of the fight. Other factors will include the opponent's resume, how well the win aged afterwards, and other circumstances like short notice, injuries and weight differences. I've used this criteria on several boxers but only 2 MMA fighters so far, Jon Jones and GSP. Anyway, let's proceed with DJ's first notable opponent. His first 2 opponents will be sorted into the D tier, but his third opponent would be Jesse Brock, who was 10 wins and 4 losses at the time. Jesse Brock actually beat 2 notable opponents on the regional scene, Tyson Nam and Thiago Alves. Also lost to the likes of Cowboy Cerrone and Jimmy Rivera. So he's not a complete schmuck, he goes in C tier and DJ gets 1 point for the win. Then with a record of 3-0, DJ gets signed to the WEC, the best promotion for a flyweight to fight in at the time, where he faced Brad Pickett. DJ would actually lose this fight in his first professional loss, Pickett being much too experienced for him, but DJ would get the chance to bounce back versus 5-0 Nick Pace. Nick Pace only ever won a single fight in the UFC versus Will Campuzano, who was never any good. He lost his next 2 and then was cut. DJ would outclass him quite clearly, and because there's no win to point towards on Nick Pace's record, I'm going to put him in the D tier, so DJ gets no points for this win. DJ's next opponent would be Demetrious Page. Page had similar fortune to Nick Pace after losing to DJ in the UFC, but he does have a legit win over Scott Jurgensen and was 3-1 in the WEC before facing DJ, so I think it would be unfair to call him a can. DJ would outclass him on the feet and submit him with a guillotine choke, and he's going to go down as a C tier win. DJ would then take on Norifumi Yamamoto, who had a record of 18-3 at the time. Again, he did go on a slide after losing to DJ, but before that, he knocked out Genki Sudo in the first round in K1, and did the same thing to Rani Yaya in the second round. DJ would outclass him over 3 rounds, and I think he's another C tier win. Now, fun fact, DJ was actually set to face Renan Barão at a time where Barão was making his UFC debut, but because Miguel Torres' opponent on the same card, Brad Pickett, had pulled out, they wanted Torres to have a fight on that card, so they booked him versus DJ instead. And Barão had to take another opponent because he was not a player in the division at the time, he was only making his debut. Miguel Torres was the former WEC bantamweight champion, winning the title versus Chase Beebe, and defending 3 times versus Yoshiro Maeda, Manny Tapia and Takeya Mizugaki, but did lose his title at the hands of Brian Bowles and then lost again versus Joseph Benavidez. But he would get 2 wins on the comeback trail before facing DJ. Now, the UFC did not have a flyweight division at this point, so all these fights were taking place at 135, where DJ is clearly undersized. As the underdog, DJ would outclass Miguel Torres over 3 rounds, in a competitive fight that DJ would win by unanimous decision. I think as a win by itself at the time, Torres would be an A tier, but because Johnson never really belonged at 135, I'm going to bump this up to an A+ tier win. DJ's next fight, however, would definitely prove he was in the wrong division, as he would get a shot versus the bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz, who would suplex DJ for 5 rounds, having a clear disadvantage in strength. Around this time, the UFC was spurred on to make the flyweight division, a division 10 pounds lighter than the one DJ was fighting in, and for his debut in that division, he'd take on Ian McCall. McCall had 2 losses in the WEC versus Charlie Valencia and Dominic Cruz, but 2 decent wins over Josier Formiga and Dustin Ortiz, and would also go on to have a competitive fight versus Joseph Benavidez and beat Brad Pickett, so I think he was a solid B+ opponent. Now, before the Cejudo rematch, this was the most controversial fight of DJ's career. The first 2 rounds were very close, very competitive, could go either way, but the 3rd round was a 10-8 in favour of Ian McCall, because DJ got beat up on the ground for about 4 minutes. So best case scenario, DJ wins the first 2 rounds but gets a draw because of the 10-8 in the 3rd. That's how I had it personally, but you could make a case for McCall winning one of the first 2 rounds. But the judges ended up giving the decision to DJ, a decision they'd actually go on to change. As it turned out, one of the judges counted up the scorecards wrong, so it would have been a draw if it was counted correctly. So the fight was overturned to a draw eventually, and I don't give points out for draws. They would take an immediate rematch, however, to settle the controversy, and DJ would win this one much clearer, and I think it is a B+ win on his record. Then DJ takes on Joseph Benavidez. Now, since the flyweight division was basically just invented, they decided to crown a champion by putting the 2 best flyweights in the world against each other, and at the time that was DJ and Joseph Benavidez. Benavidez's sole loss in his career came at the hands of Dominic Cruz, but obviously no shame there. His best win at the time was submitting Miguel Torres, as well as Rani Yahya, Eddie Wineland, and was coming off a win over Yasuhiro Urishitani. It was a very close fight, but DJ would come through as the victor, and a win that became more impressive over time as Benavidez went on 2 separate winning streaks afterwards, the first including Ian McCall and a first round knockout over Hussein Formiga, and the second featuring Tim Elliott, Dustin Ortiz, Ali Bagautinov and Henry Cejudo. Benavidez was clearly the second best flyweight in the world for a long time. He beat basically everyone except DJ himself. I'm a bit torn though between A+ and S tier. S tier is for an absolute best of the best win. Keep in mind this is also the least populated division in the entire UFC, so being the second best flyweight isn't quite as impressive as a lightweight or welterweight. Benavidez is in contention for being greatest fighter to never win a belt, but at the same time he was very close to winning the belt versus Dominic Cruz in their second fight. At 135 no less, the same situation as DJ. I am going to stick with A+ for Joseph Benavidez. He is close to S tier, but S tier is for the absolute best of the best. Benavidez was in the worst division and never won a title, but was the closest to being champion as you could get. DJ's first defense as champion would be versus John Dodson. John Dodson is famously one of the hardest punchers in UFC history, pound for pound. With that left hand he's knocked out the likes of TJ Dillashaw, beaten Tim Elliott. Hussein Formiga won the Ultimate Fighter. Even out of his prime went to close decisions versus John Lineker, Marlon Moraes. Knocks down Piotr Jan with a left hook. Beats Pedro Munoz. Even knocks out one of my personal favourite current fighters, Nathaniel Wood. DJ would outclass Dodson to a decision, and I think he is an A tier win. DJ's second defense would be versus John Moraga. Now DJ's resume does have the occasional stinker in there, and John Moraga is one of them. The next best guys were Dodson and Benavidez, and DJ already beat them. Moraga had only fought 2 times in the UFC before facing DJ, the best of those wins being versus Chris Carriasso, but did go on to beat Dustin Ortiz afterwards. He got outclassed by the likes of Joseph Benavidez, Mateus Nicolau and Sergio Pettis, but did have a really good streak of 3 wins versus Ashkan Mokhtarian, Magomed Bibilatov and Wilson Hayes. I'm going to put John Moraga in the B tier. DJ then rematches Joseph Benavidez, and DJ would actually knock him out in the first round, showing how much better DJ had become since the Brad Pickett and the Ian McCall fights. I don't give extra points for one-sided fights, however. If they're roughly the same fighter in 2 fights, they get the same ranking. So this is another A+ win on DJ's record. Then for DJ's 4th defense, he takes on Ali Bagautinov. Bagautinov was 3-0 in the UFC at the time, but those 3 wins were very good. The debut versus Marcos Vinicius, second fight versus Tim Elliott, and third fight versus John Lineker. So I do believe he earned that title shot fair and square in 3 fights, but would go on to be outclassed by the likes of Joseph Benavidez and Kyoji Horiguchi. DJ would decision Bagautinov, and I think he's a B+ win. Then DJ takes on Chris Carriasso. This was another weaker entry on his record. He started quite well with a debut win over Takeya Mizugaki, lost 2 in a row versus John Moraga and Hussein Formiga, then beat Elade Santos, Danny Martinez and Luis Smolka by split decision before fighting for the title. Before DJ would submit him with a Kimura, and I think he's a B tier win. Then DJ takes on Kyoji Horiguchi. There wasn't too much to speak of on Horiguchi's record at the time. He was 4-0 in the UFC. His first 4 opponents being quite weak, but DJ needed a title defense, so they gave him the shot after a win over Luis Godinez. It was after the DJ loss that Horiguchi's career flourished. He won 3 more fights in the UFC afterwards, including versus Ali Bagautinov, then returned to Japan to fight in Rising, where he'd get wins over the likes of future contender Manel Kape and a 10-second knockout over Ian McCall. Also a win over Kaya Sakura. DJ would submit him with an armbar 4 minutes and 59 seconds into the 5th round, making it the latest finish in UFC history. I'm going to put Kyoji Horiguchi in the A tier as a win. Then DJ takes on John Dodson again in a rematch. DJ once again wins by clear decision, and once again he goes in the A tier. Then DJ has his first fight versus Henry Cejudo as his 8th defense. To gain the shot at the title, Cejudo was coming off 4 wins in the UFC, 2 of which being versus Chris Carriasso and a split decision win over Hussein Formiga. DJ would famously crush Cejudo in the first round with knees in the clinch. Now, in order to accurately give Cejudo a score, we have to consider where he was exactly at that time of the fight. The Cejudo that fought DJ and won in the second fight and then went on to win the bantamweight title versus Marlon Moraes, I don't believe is the same Cejudo that fought DJ the first time. Cejudo was only 3 years into his MMA career by the time he fought DJ, and it was after the DJ loss where we saw a massive improvement in Cejudo's striking, as seen in his flawless performance over Wilson Hayes. So based on where Cejudo was after his split decision win over Hussein Formiga, I'm only going to put Cejudo in the B+ tier. Then DJ takes on Tim Elliott. Now, looking purely at his record, he was coming off 3 professional losses before facing DJ, which makes you think, how did he possibly earn a title shot? The answer is they set up an Ultimate Fighter tournament in the flyweight division with the sole intention of figuring out who's going to face Demetrious next. Tim Elliott was in the tournament, alongside the likes of Alejandro Pantoja, Brandon Moreno, Matt Schnell. It would come down to the final between Tim Elliott and Hiromasa Ogikubo. Elliott would win by decision and by default was the new title challenger, and would surprisingly give DJ a decent fight. Elliott doesn't have a great win-loss record, but he's always been a really tricky opponent, even now getting wins as an underdog versus Kai Asakura. So I'm going to put Tim Elliott in the B+ tier. Then DJ takes on Wilson Hayes in his 10th defense. Hayes was on a 3-fight winning streak going into the fight versus Dustin Ortiz, Hector Sandoval and Ulka Sasaki. Also previously having a win over Scott Jurgensen, but having a loss at the hands of Josier Formiga. DJ would get a routine submission win over Hayes and is going to go in B tier. Then DJ takes his last ever UFC title defense versus Ray Borg. Ray Borg was 2-1 in his last 3, losing to Justin Scoggins and getting 2 wins over Louis Smolka and Josier Formiga. And that's enough to gain a title shot at the time. You should have all by now seen how that fight plays out. In round 5, DJ gets the body lock, suplexes Ray Borg into the air, and while he's falling, catches an armbar, and submits Ray Borg with it to be the last win on DJ's UFC career. To give Ray Borg a grade, I'm going to say B tier. Then DJ takes on Henry Cejudo again in the rematch for his 12th title defense. It was an incredibly close and competitive fight that people are still debating today. If I had to personally pick a winner, I would say DJ, but it's not clear enough for me to say it's a robbery. In fact, Cejudo injured himself in the first round by rolling his ankle, so I think he deserved to get a nod after those circumstances. Cejudo becomes the 2nd flyweight champion in UFC history, and DJ gets sent over to ONE FC in exchange for Ben Askren. And in his first fight, he'd take on Yuya Wakamatsu. Wakamatsu was coming off a loss at the time at the hands of Danny Kingad. He is a guy who went on to gradually improve more and more after the DJ fight, winning 5 in a row before ultimately losing to Adriano Moraes, but would actually avenge that loss quite recently, knocking out Moraes in the first round. But similar to Cejudo, the Wakamatsu that did this is not the same Wakamatsu that lost to DJ in 2019, as Wakamatsu would get submitted in the 2nd round by DJ with a guillotine choke. It is a bit weird to rank one championship MMA wins. The talent pool is clearly smaller than it is in the UFC, but Wakamatsu was decent. I'll say B tier for its time. Then DJ takes on Tatsumitsu Wada. Since joining ONE FC, Wada has had a very win-loss sort of career, losing to Reece McLaren in his debut, beating Eugene Toquero, losing to Danny Kingad, beating Gustavo Balart, losing to DJ himself, beating Ivandilo Delfino. You may notice a clear difference in the guys he beats compared to guys he loses to. DJ would beat him by decision, I think is a C tier win. Then DJ takes on Danny Kingad. Kingad has wins over DJ's previous 2 opponents, Wada and Wakamatsu. Also beat Reece McLaren, I'm going to say B tier again. Then DJ finally faces the bantamweight champion Adriano Moraes. Moraes did have a solid resume going into this fight. He initially became champion in 2014, beating Geye Eustaquio. Lost the belt to Kairat Akhmatov, but then regained the belt in the next year. Beat Danny Kingad. Lost the belt to former champion Eustaquio, then regained it again. Moraes would actually end up being the first person to stop Demetrious Johnson with a knee to the head in the 2nd round to defend his title, which did shock a lot of people, and did show that the ONE Championship talent pool wasn't quite as bad as maybe people thought it was. Moraes and DJ would then go for a rematch, which saw DJ get a knockout in the 4th round with a flying knee to finally gain the ONE Championship belt. Now it is tricky to rank Moraes in the criteria, because people mainly rate him based on that one DJ fight. I want to say A tier, but once again DJ is fighting at bantamweight, and Moraes is massive for the division, so just like the Miguel Torres fight, I'm going to put Moraes as an A+ win. DJ then takes on Rod Sang in a special rules exhibition fight, which I'm not going to count, and having a trilogy bout versus Moraes, which he wins by decision, and ultimately a year later retires from professional competition. So to overlook the criteria and give him a final score, I've got 3 A+ tier wins: Miguel Torres, Joseph Benavidez twice, and Adriano Moraes twice. I've got no S tier wins, but Benavidez was close. 6 B tier wins: John Moraga, Chris Carriasso, Wilson Hayes, Ray Borg, Yuya Wakamatsu and Danny Kingad. 4 C tier wins: Jesse Brock, Damasio Page, Norifumi Yamamoto and Tatsumitsu Wada. The only D tier opponents on his record were in his first 5 fights: Frankie Mendez, Marshall Carlisle and Nick Pace. If his losses were to be wins, Brad Pickett would be B+, Dominic Cruz would be S, Henry Cejudo would be an S, and Adriano Moraes would be an A+. This ultimately gives DJ a score of 86. Now as to where that ranks on the leaderboard, GSP has 106, John Jones has 93, and DJ has 86. Now the more we do these videos, the more we're going to see 86 is not a bad score at all. I'd be surprised if anyone beats GSP's 106. And anyway, that's going to do it for the video. Like and subscribe, leave a comment. Goodbye.